Today's topic is scripting in OpenAir. So our August focus is how to expand your PSA into being a more robust solution for yourself. And one of the options with this OpenAir environment is the scripting capabilities that have been enhanced over the past couple of years. So we're just going to jump right into it after I tell you about our news and events. So this Friday, or next Friday, we're having an OpenAir user group in the DC area. So if you haven't signed up, please sign up. It's at my old alma mater, so to speak, at Software AG. And in September, we're going to have one in the Minneapolis area. We're looking for a host office. So if you're interested in that area, please let us know. And then we have a couple of conferences coming up in the October timeframe. The Technology Services World for the TSIA organization. We are a sponsor there, so we hope to see you there. Or we're going to also be that same week, back-to-back almost. We're going to be at the Institute of Management Consultants here in the DC area, and we are a gala sponsor. So we look forward to seeing you if you happen to be at either of those events. So scripting. Scripting in OpenAir allows you to basically add more business controls that you would like to see in the product that it doesn't do natively. Things like validating the data or creating data so that there's more of a consistency. Things like checking a box and having a customer PO created and linked automatically to the project. Those kind of things, you think about it. If you've been using the system for a while, you're sort of used to doing everything step by step, but scripts now can automate some of this activity. And recently, the most recent enhancement is the ability for the scripts to send emails. So now you have a way to trigger a notification of some substance given an event happens or a condition happens, right? The scripting engine is using standard JavaScript, and it relies on OpenAir specific libraries. So we'll kind of highlight some of the key ones or the functionality of that in this webinar. But unlike other web-based scripting systems, you cannot manipulate the user interface. So we're really talking about the database interacting with the database and doing error checking based on data in the database. So you can obviously make an error happen and display on the form if you're doing some kind of data validation, but for the most part you can't change the way a form looks or change the way the system behaves from a user interface display perspective. Now, the types of scripts that you can have, there's two main types of scripts available in OpenAir. So scripts, there's things called form scripts. So these are the things that when you hit that save button or you're entering values into a form or you're approving something like a timesheet, this is the script that runs when you click one of those buttons, the save button or the approve button. Okay, it's primarily used for validation of fields, as you would expect. Adding some logic to say, if I put an A in this field, make sure the other field has a B in it, and you can do some data manipulation. Now, we call out here it's used for limited data manipulation because we're going to introduce the concept of governance limits that you may or may not be aware of, which prevents form scripts from going crazy and using all kinds of processing power within the user interface, because obviously forms are a big part of what people do in the system. They're always editing and modifying data in the system, so there are some controls levied by NetSuite to make sure that you're writing a well-formed form script and keeping it within a short period of time to execute. Opposite of that is something called a scheduled script. So this is something that you schedule to run on a regular basis. The soonest it can run is every 5 minutes, and it allows you to do all kinds of things. You can create data, you can move data, you can validate data, send emails out if there's some kind of condition you want to do, but it's primarily used to create records or set values based on conditions that you want logic-wise. Okay. I do want to highlight something because a lot of people that I work with, a lot of customers that we work with, obviously you want to try the scripts out and you don't want to impact production right away. If you have a sandbox, it's always convenient to do stuff in the sandbox and then move it into production. You'll find out a little bit later in this presentation, there has been steps taken by NetSuite to give you the ability to do stuff in production without impacting everyone at the same time while you're testing. But of course, if you do have a sandbox, it's always great to do things in the sandbox first, right, and then move it to production. The one thing about scripting in the sandbox is that you have to enable the scripting capability in OpenAir. On top of that, you have to make a special request to NetSuite support to enable the ability for scheduled scripts to actually run in the sandbox environment. They have to take some additional steps coordinating with engineering to enable that part of it in the sandbox. Similar to those of you who know about sandbox capability, it natively does not send emails, right? That functionality is turned off, but you can ask NetSuite to turn that on. Of course, there's always a big caution with that because you don't want to confuse production emails with sandbox emails. But it is an extra step. So if you are going to try out scripting or have been frustrated trying to get your scheduled script to run, it's probably because the feature isn't really fully enabled yet in your sandbox. So speaking of governance, so governance is how NetSuite ensures that the code that you're writing is not going to exceed a certain thresholds of execution. Meaning every time somebody saves a time entry in a timesheet, you don't want a script that takes 10 minutes to run and bogs down the resources using your system so it slows down the performance of your environment. Okay. So what they've done is they've set a limit on the number of units and the amount of time each of the types of scripts can run. And a unit actually is something, it varies based on what it is, the action that you're taking. So some examples are if you read a value from a field on a form, that's 1 unit. But if you read values from a database like a full table, that's 20 units for the initial call and then 10 units for each additional record that you read. There's from a trying to relate to, okay, as I'm writing the code, how many units do I expect to use? That is something that's actually documented in the NetSuite OpenAir User Scripting Guide. It does talk about the governance limits in this guide, and it gives you the information about how each call uses what each call to the database uses as far as units. So let me find one here while I'm got everyone on the phone so you can see what I'm talking about. So you see here, like there's a series of call examples, the different functions you can call. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But part of the definition of the call in the scripting guides is it explains how many units it uses. So that's always a good reference as you're writing the code. You know, the first attempt is write the code the way you want the logic to be. Second, go back and see how many units you're using and see if you can streamline it at all. Remove some unnecessary calls because it could time out. When a script times out, it stops running and it won't complete its action. Okay? And if it's a form script, it will actually throw an error on the form and it won't let you proceed any further with the activities you're doing on that particular form. Right? So the governance limits are pretty strict. And there's 2 sets based on the type of script you're dealing with. So the form script is very tightly controlled. You have 5 seconds to run, which in processing time is quite a long time, but you only have 1,000 units. And you can actually blow through 1,000 units very, very, very quickly, especially on something like a timesheet script, because there's always lots of time entries to read in the database. So that the form scripts are very limited on the number of units. With the introduction of emails, they've also put governance limits on the email capability of the tool. So each script, the form scripts can only send up to 3 emails, and they're limited in length to 1,000 characters, with the first line that you're passing to the content of the email treated as the subject line. So there is obviously some consideration here on how you want to pass the messages across with 1,000 character max. Now, the scheduled scripts, we like to say, are sort of like they can run forever, right? They can run up to an hour at a time. So of course, if you have a scheduled script kicking off every 5 minutes, you're going to hold up a lot of processing because the scheduled scripts have to finish before the next one kicks off of itself. So you schedule the script. It can run for up to an hour, and it can consume up to 1 million units. So this does give you a lot more flexibility, and it can send up to 100 emails also at the same size limit. So what ends up happening many times is you're coming up with your solution, you're actually thinking, boy, it would be nice if I could just, if I submit my timesheet, it does some kind of logic check. But the time entry table and the time entries on the form for the timesheet may be too big for a form script to run by itself. So you start coming up with ways to use scheduled scripts that set certain flags that the form script then uses to filter the data, so it's only calling calling fewer records to consume fewer units. So you start using these in combination with each other to be able to achieve the results that you're looking for. Now the Scripting Center was introduced in 2014, October 2014, so it is still fairly new. It's about 1.5 years old, but every release they're adding more and more functionality to it, making it easier and easier for people to take advantage of this functionality. When it first came out, it was very much unless you know how to write code, you can't use it, but now there's been a lot of enhancements to help people as they're understanding the concept of writing JavaScript, to be able to have sort of cut and paste type functionality already predefined in the tool that you can just select a sample piece of code and pop it into your JavaScript logic. So the Scripting Center has gone a long way to help people build their own JavaScripts. If you do have a development background, it's still a bonus. JavaScripting is coding. It's not like a configuration checkbox like many of the features in OpenAir. Okay. Now, as you develop a script, this is what NetSuite has done for us to be able to allow you to use your production environment and not impact anyone as you're developing and testing a script. It has a way to sort of set up a script, save the script, and then put it into a test mode. And in the test mode, you as the person who's running the script are the only person that is impacted. So you, when you put the script in place and you change the mode to test, only you are being impacted by it. So as you test it, you're not going to impact anyone else. And then when you decide that the testing is sufficient or you're good to put it into production, you can put it into deploy mode. And when you're in deploy mode, that's when it can start impacting everyone else in the environment. So if you don't happen to have a sandbox, never fear. There's still capabilities for you to control it in the production environment without impacting anyone. Of course, once it's deployed, if you do need to make a revision, you just put it back into revise. You put it into a revise mode that takes it offline. Again, won't impact anyone. So if you happen to deploy it, there's errors happening, you can slip it back into revise mode, and you'll essentially be disabling it for everyone else except for yourself. So the Scripting Center has different components to it. So when you go into the Scripting Center right away, you'll see Form and Scheduled as tabs. So those are the scripts that you can have. The Form scripts are in one tab and the Scheduled scripts are in the other tab. In each of those tabs, when you open it up and you're looking at a specific script, the left panel of the window shows you the functions that you can take advantage of, and the right side shows you the editor that you can use to actually write your code. Of course, you can always write your code in any other thing, Notepad or some other Java environment, but it has to belong in this editor function for it to basically be processed by OpenAir to be able to run. Okay. The other tabs at the top, Library, Parameters, and Solutions, they give you the ability to sort of build components that you can reuse in the environment. So library is a way that if you have a certain function that checks the date format or something like that, you can actually create a JavaScript that all it does is do a date check. And then when you write your other scripts can call that script. So you basically write your own functions and create a library for yourself. Parameters is an advanced functionality so that you can actually pass additional information into the scripts. And then solutions is a way, that's a recent thing that came out, I believe, in the October timeframe of last year, that give you the ability to sort of package your scripts with, if you have multiple pieces, if you have 3 or 4 scripts plus some library components and parameters, you can package that all together and check it in as a solution, and it will distribute those pieces as necessary throughout the other components of the scripting center. Okay, a little bit more advanced functionality, but it's nice if you have someone building your scripting solution and they can deliver as a solution and you just install the solution and it takes care of where to put everything automatically. From a scripting functions, the left panel there, the very first part of it is called the Scripting Studio, and it has just your basic information about who owns this script, what's the initial function call, so that's the thing that, that's the entrance function that you come into the script as. It starts off the script. What libraries are you calling? What's the trigger that this is connected to? So maybe before approval of a timesheet, that's the entrance to be able to kick off a form script, for example. The one thing about the Scripting Studio and identifying the owner of the script, just like many functionalities in OpenAir, the owner that is associated to the script impacts what that script can do and see. So the filter sets of that user, the permission sets of that user through the role, that impacts what the script itself can do. So if the user can only see people in North America and the script is supposed to check everyone's timesheet, it actually can only see people in North America to check the timesheet. So just keep in mind, it's usually an administrator role that tends to be associated with these scripting, these JavaScripts. And you may want to consider just dedicating a user account if you can free up a license to do that. So there is a single user associated with those scripts. The SOAP Explorer area and the Functions Explorer area are ways to basically get preformed logic and cut and paste it into your code. So if I go and look at the Scripting Center here and I go inside an example script that we have, okay, so the SOAP Explorer here, if I open this up, you can see here that this is a list of all the different types of objects available in the OpenAir database. So if I wanted to do something with OpenAir roles, I can select this and it gives me basically the logic on how to read that from the database, how to declare this as an object that I can use in the script. And then the Functions Explorer gives you the options of how to, oops, let's scroll this down. The Functions Explorer gives you the way to look at how to do a query, for example. How do I get the information that I need to do a query? So NetSuite's trying to give you information to make it easier for you to write this type of logic in your JavaScript. The script parameters, that's that parameter tab. It's an advanced functionality, so there is more information about it in the scripting guide. I'm not going to cover it here. There is a new custom fields operation which basically displays for you all of the custom fields that you've defined in your environment and what table they belong to. So if I take a look again at our example here, you can see custom fields here, and if I open that up, it shows me here's all the custom fields that have been defined and the table that it's associated to or the object is in brackets. So I can pick that very quickly so that I know that's what I'm going to put into the script. And then the final one is terminology. So as many of you know, you can override the common terms that are used in the environment. So those terms can also be part of what the script is understanding, right? Especially the customization when you have a rename in the environment. Now, the functions itself rely on calling JavaScript libraries that are very specific to OpenAir. So they all start with NSOA, so NetSuite OpenAir, okay? Dot, and then the type of library, which is the type of call that you're making. So is it a context, which is just system information, things like how many units have I used, which is a way to sort of keep track. If you want to put that in your code, as you run your first test, you can see how many units you're consuming along the way by getting a little bit of a kind of a debug line, so to speak. And the form is the command to be able to retrieve data from save or submitted forms. Meta is more informational, hey, I made it here type, another debug logic for those of us who are coders. The record, NSOA.record, allows you to create objects. So this is how you can create new data items into the OpenAir environment. And then the web service API allows you to manipulate the data within the environment, with the database itself. Okay. So like here's a form script example. It's probably not one that too many people would need, but this one, for example, says, if I find a negative entry on a timesheet, make sure that I pop up a message saying, hey, by the way, all the the value must be positive would be the message that shows up. So you can see that I'm using the NSOA.form option because I'm basically going to I'm getting information from a form with a get value, and then the form.error is basically the error message I want to display. And this NSOA meta.log that's in the middle there is just my little line that goes into the log file as the script is running so that I can understand what's happening along the way. What happened at this point? What was the word trace will be displayed. The word total with a colon and a space will be displayed. And then that plus total means, and then also tack on or concatenate the value that's in the total field that I just queried from the form. Okay, so here I'm getting the information. I'm displaying a trace value in my log file. Logs are produced as part of the script run process. And then the result is if it's less than 0, I produce this error on the form itself. Okay. From a schedule script examples, this is where you have a lot more flexibility, a lot more things you can cover here. Some examples of what we've helped customers build is basically totaling up all the planned hours on the tasks and populating that in the budget hours field, something that many of you may be interested in getting, and we already have a version of it available. Or basically using the budget lines, the project budget line, not project budget, budget transaction lines, having some kind of custom field there like an hours field, and then adding the hours up from those lines and putting it into the budget hours field. What about things like when you create an invoice or a charge and there's a specific value that you need to populate or display on that, but you want to copy it from whatever's on the project so far. So the scheduled script can basically look data up in one area and apply it to data elements in another area. So things that would have had to be done manually or something now that can be automated. And even things like updating fields based on what has happened. So basically updating project fields once something specific has happened on a task, like the task may have been closed, so now it's complete, and now the scheduled script goes through, detects the task is closed, and uses the name of the task to populate a field saying so-and-so task has been closed or something like that. So all different functions that today people will use reports to address, or they'll just populate the data manually, but scheduled scripts you can start thinking about how can I make my life easier, right? So just some best practices to share before we open up the phone lines for questions. There are a lot of things at your disposal, and they're not limited to what OpenAir as a system has. It's JavaScripting at the end of the day. So although there's an OpenAir user scripting guide, it is very good. It's very comprehensive, and they update it with every release. It's available from the Suite Answers support tab. We also suggest that you take a look at, there's a data dictionary available. There's also a database user guide available in the support desk. But the database/single user.html is the data dictionary. So familiarize yourself with that data structure, because that's how you'll get to know what's the name of the field you need to call. Okay. And then we're just recommending the w3schools.com site to learn JavaScript. And there's plenty of training courses out there and books available. It is standard, it's just JavaScript at the end of the day, and then you have to plug in the actual specifics from the OpenAir environment. Okay. If you're writing your first script or working on a pretty complicated script, we definitely recommend that you put some of those meta lines in there, META lines in there, just so you can trace where you're at in going through the script. that's the best way to debug them right now. In the environment, there isn't really a debugger available, so you have to kind of add yourself saying, I made it here, I made it here, I made it here, and then use those like the commands that show you how many units you've consumed so that you can see where you're at as far as the limits are concerned. And finally, when you're using the scripts, the log level is something you can actually set. So when you have your script set up, there is a logging control in the environment. So if I take a look at just the scheduled scripts that I have checked in here, if I scroll over, here's the log severity. So I can actually control what level of logging I want to turn on. Of course, fatal or error is the ones that we recommend that you would have in production. But if you put like trace and info and debug on, these are the ones that give you much more data so that you can understand what's going on if there's problems with your script or some unwanted behavior along the way. So the scripting is something to consider if you want to introduce logic that's specific to your environment, or logic that you've always wished OpenAir can do, but they just haven't been able to implement it in the tool yet. So can you take advantage of the fact that now you may be able to make the system do that? It should increase your data accuracy because things like the validations now are going to be available versus having to do reactive audits to clean up data afterwards. And of course, now you have a whole nother realm of ways to send emails. Not that OpenAir sends too many emails, but this way you can have very pointed, specific triggering events or validation situations that send emails for people to take action, okay, outside of what OpenAir provides or the notifications feature. But definitely pay attention to how you're designing your script and the solutions, because there are very strict governance limits when it comes to form scripts. And there are plenty of people out there that have worked on scripts ourselves. NetSuite obviously has some examples. Coming to the OpenAir user groups, definitely people share what kind of scripts they've had. The LinkedIn OpenAir users group, I threw a poll out there saying, hey, what other kind of unique scripts have you done? So looking for feedback so people can share experiences, information, and even the code, so that everyone can take advantage of the scripting solutions that are available out there today. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and open up the phone line.